So Hillary's lead in the polls is shrinking by any metric you measure it by, and the only topic anybody's talking about is this email mess and the FBI's decision to reopen its investigation. But is that why so much of Hillary's lead is really evaporating? Well, we'll get to that in a moment. But first, let's get an in-depth look at where the race is tonight, and not just the big polls, but also where the numbers fall, and as Jeannie said, the map, Andrew.
Yeah, and we have a lot of different ways of looking at this, Rich. As we've mentioned in last segment, Clinton's lead in the poll averages have been cut in half since last Wednesday. But today's snapshot is a combination of good news and bad news for Hillary Clinton. Clinton still leads by all metrics, but there is movement towards Trump. 3 national polls, as we mentioned, out since Sunday, put her lead between 1 and 3 points. The poll average has her at 2.8-point lead. Election forecasts still have her as a heavy favorite, though those numbers from 538 The Times and the betting markets are both down a little bit. We're seeing more movement in swing states, too, where Trump has expanded his lead in Ohio and he's taken the lead in Florida. Elsewhere, Clinton's leads are down but have endured thus far, including in typically red Arizona. Now, there is one additional source to turn to tonight, and that's data from swing states that have early voting. Now, this can only tell us the party ID of the people who have actually voted already. It doesn't tell us who they actually voted for, but the numbers are still worth a look. In Florida, where more than 5 million votes have already been cast, slightly more Democrats have voted than Republicans. Voters who belong to neither party very likely to determine who wins in the Sunshine State. In Nevada, Democrats have a 34,000 voter edge right now, with about a third of the state having already voted. Many early votes coming from outside Las Vegas. That is a particularly good sign for Democrats in Nevada. North Carolina might have the biggest lean in early voting right now, where analysis suggests turnout favors Democrats by 11.5 points. Early voting in Ohio bringing good news for Republicans, the Buckeye state with a 4.5-point voter edge for the GOP. And early voting in Colorado favors Democrats, though by a smaller margin than we've seen in recent polling, Rich.
And explain, Jeannie, what that usually tells us. Is that a harbinger of what happens on Election Day?
It usually is, barring, as you mentioned, some kind of October surprise. And the thing that really concerns me, while I have long been a proponent of early voting, and I still favor it because it does increase the number of people who can participate, and our voting is onerous as it is worrisome that these people have voted before information has come out. Obviously, they did it by choice. They could have waited, but it is troublesome that they're doing it before, and some people you talk to on the ground say, had I known this, I might have voted differently. So we have what, I think, and Andrew probably has about 20 million people in this country who have already cast a vote long before this information comes out, and as you mentioned, stuff is going to happen in the next 8 days that they will not be able to take into account as they go into the polls.
It's also a very good measure of voter intensity in particular states. For example, in Florida, the voters are about where their party divide is. You're getting about the same percentages. Ohio is leaning a little more Republican. Colorado and North Carolina right now leaning decidedly more Democratic than the polling advantage would indicate. So you get the sense that Democrats are doing well in those states.
You know, one thing I found really interesting is usually you can close your eyes and say, you know, with certainty where a Democrat and where a Republican will spend their last week before Election Day, try and get up the base, et cetera, or maybe go to that key swing state. A little bit different. Take a look at the schedules for the candidates, and we'll start with Donald Trump. He's going to Michigan, as well as 2 stops in Pennsylvania, where you'd expect Wisconsin, North Carolina, which we showed you that it's important, Florida you'd expect there as well. His running mate, Mike Pence, he's also making some stops as well. And on the flip side, Clinton's going to the always critical Ohio, Florida, then she's going to Arizona. And also some of our other surrogates like Tim Kaine, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Bill Clinton, the other Clintons, as well as New York's own Kirsten Gillibrand, Elizabeth Warren with the progressive side. They're all going to be hitting the trail. More surrogates for whatever it's worth. But in states like Arizona, which are really interesting in terms of where the map is.
Rich, I just wanted to follow up on a great point that Professor Jeannie made about our election days and how early you can vote. You know, we have elections today now on a Tuesday in the midweek, work week, for a certain limited number of hours. Why can't we have the elections on an all weekend, the weekend before the election? Wouldn't that make a lot more sense? So people don't have to take off from work and they can vote at their leisure over a several days period of time.
Well, probably the media wouldn't go for it because then we'd have to work all weekend, Dominic. But I mentioned the calendar, and there's 8 days. And, you know, I think traditional, the person at home says, all right, the kitchen sink and then stuff has been thrown at each of the candidates. I'm saying, as they say, stay tuned. There's going to be more. And there was the sense that Clinton was up by double digits. So all the extra stuff on Trump that, believe it or not, we hadn't heard, there was no need for it. And I'm not basing this on any inside information, but we've heard some scuttlebutt that just like the Billy Bush video came out, where obviously he said those horrible things that he did about women, there may be others that could even be racial. Again, I've not heard this or seen this, but I'm hearing that may be percolating now under it. It's those kind of things that could find their way into the landscape.
No doubt about it, Richard. This thing is going to be ugly and nasty, and it's going to redefine the definition
Uglier
of mud.
and nastier?
Uglier and nastier. That's exactly what's going to happen. You make a good point. Hillary Clinton could have rose garden this and, let him say whatever he wants. We're sitting on a lead. Let's just cruise to Election Day. I'm working on my cabinet. No more. She can't take that for granted. So they're going to have to throw everything they have at Trump, and rightfully so. If this man has a shot at becoming president, we should know, and trust me, there are a lot of things out there, Richard, that has not surfaced yet.
And as we know, traditionally, opposition research drops late. So you're absolutely right. If there is more there, and Dominic's probably right, there is, it's going to drop late, probably right before voting begins.
But it begs the question then, why hasn't it dropped already? And I think to a certain degree that's because they need the email thing to sort of go away off the front pages. Otherwise, if they drop something else about Donald Trump, it won't get the full oxygen that they want.
So it's
to
going to be
get.
careful who releases it, too, because that might have a boomerang effect if they think you're playing dirty here in the 11th hour, even
One
though
more
they
point.
are.
The other October surprise we haven't seen is Donald Trump stepping in it himself. He's been remarkably muted in his response so far. Hasn't tweeted anything. He hasn't, in every situation we've seen up to now, whenever Hillary Clinton has done something to damage her own campaign, Trump has made it worse for himself by making some sort of error or some sort of gaffe or whatever the case may be. He hasn't done that so far this go around.
Richard, let me just say this one thing. Remember, I've known Weiner a very long time. This whole thing that the FBI stumbled on these new emails, doesn't pass the smell test. Somebody's trying to cut a deal for themselves and say, hey, look, you don't think that Weiner knew I better destroy this phone? He's missed the email himself.
I've got somebody who follows polls as well as anyone I've known, and also I know somebody, a little bit of a historian here. Remember how it was, my God, the ad of all ads that we never thought we'd see with, go back to Goldwater with a Daisy ad, with the nuclear mushroom cloud. They just dropped an ad like this on Trump, and we're not even talking about it. That's how off the rails this election season has gone. Do you really want to trust Trump with the launch codes here? An effective ad, but with the lunacy of the last 14 months, that one's like, oh, yeah.
Forgive me, I want to get into what you just said about
Gotta make it quick, though.
The seriousness of national security. Russia has sent an armada of naval ships to the Middle East. They wanted this, including their only aircraft carrier. They wanted to refuel in Spain. Russian ships. Spain's a NATO country. The U.S. under Obama and NATO said to Spain, don't let Russia refuel its naval armada in Spain. And Spain canceled the refueling of the Russian ships. If Donald Trump were president, this is a man who has refused to condemn Vladimir Putin, who says we should get along with Putin.
In fact, support him today on the stump.
And we should compromise more with Putin, and that Putin's the better leader than Obama. Imagine what President Trump would say to that Russian armada trying to get through the Spanish
These
ports
are the kind
for
of things
refueling.
we should be talking about now. But Dominic mentioned a name a moment ago. When we come back from the break, in a perfect way, in an unfortunate way, it really crystallizes where we are. Our disgraceful 2016 election, as we move from rock bottom to whatever's below that, thanks now to this guy. Yes, Anthony Weiner, who I had the quote-unquote pleasure of interviewing this summer here. We're going to run through just how low we've gotten, and believe it or not, on how this guy, who gave tabloid gold to the Daily News and New York Post for so many times, may have impacted this race here in ways that we cannot even imagine.